Good afternoon, everyone. Kumar Data Train here with Agile Meridian, and joined by Chris Daly and Michael France, my partners in this little endeavor around being safe with the Scale and Agile framework. And this week, we're going to cover the third principle. If you missed the first two episodes, just go back and watch them, and you'll be all caught up. So the third principle, and I don't know, you guys, maybe quick intros are in order, just 10 seconds, whatever. And let me switch to another perspective here.
That makes my face bigger. That's probably bad.
Chris?
So I'm Chris Daly, and I'm a partner with Agile Meridian. And I am an SPC, and I've been doing SAFE for a couple of years. I've been doing enterprise transformations for the last 20 years.
I'm also an SPC and an SPCT candidate, working with Agile Meridian for many years now, and transformation for about 8 years. So yeah, I'm happy to be here to help out.
Yep. And the three of us are going to be partnering to bring courses and videos like this to you. So with that, let's get started on this week's broadcast, which is on principle number 3, assume variability, preserve options. Look at that. I'm an SPC. I didn't even say it right. And this
it's a mouthful. It's okay. It's a mouthful.
It seems very clinical, very kind of dry. Chris, how would you describe this?
It's tough in my opinion, this is the toughest principle to get your head around. It's the one that when I'm in, training folks and talking to architects and folks like that, this is the one I get the most pushback on, right? Because it's defying hundreds of years of the way we've been taught, right? We've been taught to plan things out. We're going to go out and we're going to do something, and here's the tool we're going to use to do it, right? And this doesn't say that. This isn't that. That's not what the goal of this principle is. Right. So I think in some cases, I found that you're almost fighting human nature.
Yeah, you want to pick one thing and stick with it and until the end, until you're done with it. And this is saying, no, don't do that. Assume that things will change and hedge your bets. Pick lots of different options, lots of different scenarios to test out and try, and eventually you will come to the right solution.
Yeah, everything looks like when you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right?
Yeah,
that's kind of the other side of this, right? This principle.
Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I was just listening to that, and it comes back to it is against our human nature. I like what you said there, Chris, because if you say these words, don't commit too soon, right? That doesn't feel good. That's not what we're taught, right? We're taught be committed, decisive, make decisions, right? But when you think about it, what this principle is really saying is don't commit too soon. Certainly explore, go through kind of that design thinking mindset. Let's look at our options. Let's look at some ideas and relentlessly question the validity of those ideas before we commit. That doesn't fit nice and neatly into humanity the way we were raised and the way we do things today. I don't think. I think when you look at for examples of this in what we do, one of the things that stood out to me is if you take a look when you're trying to bring software into an enterprise, right? Probably a lot of our people listeners that are watching this or listening to this, they've been in that situation. We have a tool we're trying to bring into our enterprise. The right thing to do, of course, is stack those tools up next to each other. Let's look at Jira, and then let's look at, PlanView, or take your pick, whatever tool, and compare amongst them. That is a good example of using this principle, but now let's apply that in our solutioning, right? Whatever we're doing and whatever solutions that we're bringing to the table is we've got to find the right solution. The difference is, a tool, they've already done the work on the tool, and you can do a comparative and maybe do some test cases and some stuff like that. But your solutioning, when the teams are getting in there, writing code and testing and going through their process, once they start that, they've committed to some extent. And I think, Chris, what you were saying, that's where you get the pushback, right? You committed to, hey, we've already started. We're writing code. We're doing testing, and we're promoting things into the environments. And it's like, you want to pivot? Wait a minute. That's, we need to keep going down this path we've already committed to. And I think,
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's a good point. And you brought up design thinking. I'm going to show that here again. And I think design thinking is a really good way to think about this principle: assume variability, preserve options. Because in design thinking, you're doing exactly that. In the beginning of a product lifecycle, you are investing in the least expensive options to get feedback from your customers, and you're doing paper prototypes, and you're doing user research and surveys and things like that to understand what people want, what people need, how they may use existing solutions before you start committing a design, sort of whittling down amongst many options, committing to a design that's going to work. And it sounds like that's what you're referring to here, right? So it goes against human nature, because a lot of people want commitments. They want you to make a decision. But design thinking seems like it's a way to get people out of that habit. You're still making commitments, but you're making commitments to experiments that you're going to try something, and you're going to get some feedback from it. And then you're going to use that feedback to guide your next experiment. What do you think?
Maybe the word should be "don't code too soon."
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe.
But you've seen there's another manifestation of this in that I've seen, and it's and I'll say a product name, right? We want you to go in and we want to convert this thing to Salesforce, right? And they've signed the contract. We're going to build it in Salesforce, and we may not know that that's the right solution, right? But we've committed so early that by signing that contract, that now we have to go forward. And the risk is, and this is probably outside of the design thinking concept, but the risk is we're going to go down this path and we're going to get to a point where we're going to figure out it's the wrong solution. And then what do? Right? Well, the guys that made the decision and signed the contract say, just push on, which we're going good money after bad, right? I mean, or bad money after good, I guess. But, we're continuing down this path, even though we know the decision's wrong. And in most organizations, it would be frowned upon to say, "Wait, we've made the wrong decision. We want to take this other option," right? But that's not what you're talking about, Michael. That you're trying to get the organization to postpone that, right, and make those decisions later.
And you're absolutely correct. I think the only way we influence that is to teach this principle, or the SAFe principles, but these principles have to be embodied in leaders. The leaders that are making the strategy decision, like that you called out, Chris, is saying, "Hey, listen, we're just going to go forward. We've already signed the contract." Maybe if they knew the principle, we use this example and we can show them, look, this is not what you want to do. Don't make that kind of call. I mean, that's where we really embody it in the leadership, and you can really see. Once the leadership understands the principle, we can see that having an impact. Even the expectations, we took it down to code and doing design thinking, but even those expectations have to be rooted in these principles in leadership, I think, in order for us to impact that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's up to leaders too. One of the things that we talk a lot about in SAFe is not just in SAFe, but in Agile and in lean thinking, lean startups, is pivot or persevere, making those decisions to, instead of throwing good money after bad, is let's pivot. It was a wrong decision. Let's recover. We can make another decision that's maybe better for the organization, better for the customer. And a lot of times people don't do that, right? Because cultural, or that's not how they're bonused, or whatever it might be. They're not prone to do that. But you're right. I think it's a question of leadership, teaching people about this principle, and then finding tangible ways for leaders, people that are planning the strategy, to use this principle on a day-to-day basis. Any examples come to mind from your experience, either of you, on how this can be used or how you've used it?
Yeah, I can think of one specifically. I had a client that was in the healthcare industry, and they, right when COVID started, actually, they were an online. They had, obviously they had a website and they had web related online engagement, but suddenly nobody wanted to come to the doctor's office, as you can imagine, and so they had to basically change their model from sending nurses into the home or bringing people into the office. They wanted a remote option where we could at least diagnose from a distance, right? Keeping that safe distance. And they went down the path. Initially, their path was, we're going to do this on Apple phones. And so they went down iPhone, that journey. And very quickly, then they started, well, what about Androids and all these the other platforms? And then what they ended up pivoting to actually through a good application of this, they went and prototyped. They had UX designers come in and they had the theoretical thinking in place, the design thinking, and they ended up pivoting completely away from phones to tablets. And what ended up in like 1 quarter, it took them about a quarter to come to the realization, we're not going to do phones. We're going to do tablets first. We'll do phones later, but we'll do tablets first because we're getting more bang for our buck. It's easier for us to focus. And there were some other decisions around the operating systems, et cetera. But the principle was solid there. And what I remember from that client is the principle, the design decisions were made right at that it was manager director level, right? Where the teams were given pause. Look, we're going to think through this together. They brought in the architects. They brought in their RTE was very much a proponent of this principle. She actually was the one I would give the credit to for bringing this thinking to life in her organization. And you could see that play out as they went through kind of the design process and considering their different options, preserving their option.
Right. Yeah.
The example that pops, and I didn't think about it until you started talking, Michael. But if you think, and not to gin up any anti-vaxxers that might be out there, but if you think about COVID, right? And what did the federal government do? They paid a number of companies to go forward and develop a vaccine for COVID. And as they went forward, right, they said, at least the rationale I heard was that, it's going to cost us less to do it this way and have somebody come through than it is to put all our money on one company and have, a year from now, we're no further along. And that was an example of where even today they're still doing that.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic example.
It's an effective model. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I can think of back in 2013, I did some time with the Census Bureau, and they were developing an application to take the census in 2020, and they started doing the work in 2013. And one of the assumptions they made was that the internet will be largely ubiquitous across the country by 2020. Like, you can get Wi-Fi, you can get, a cell service pretty much anywhere in the country by then. And they needed some sort of a device that will allow census takers to take the census and do their work. But they didn't know which platform to use. And back in 2013, Microsoft had a tablet form, Android did and still does, and of course iOS, but they didn't know which platform was going to be the one that would survive, right, and up until 2020. And so they developed this census taking application on all 3 platforms until they were sure which horse to back, right? It ended up being the iOS, and that they made the decision probably around 2016 or so. But they developed all 3 for quite a while before they made that decision. They did lots of design prototypes, lots of user feedback and user surveys, and of course testing the application out and seeing where the market went. So that's another example.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, from your experience, are there ways that you've used to help people that you work with, leaders, strategists and within organizations, to apply this principle? I mean, yes, it is a little counterintuitive for people that have to make a decision and stick with it. But what have you done that's worked for you?
I can tell you with one finance company, what we did very early on, and we didn't have to do it for very long, actually, maybe 6 months or so, we required gently, we required the product owners and the architects who were doing solutioning to at least have one option or an excuse that why they didn't have an option, right? And that was just to get the you know, hate to do it that way. That's, you know, I'm not saying that's the best way to do it. What it was to get them thinking about it, because they were so used to, I'm gonna hurry up and get you a solution. They rushed a solution, rush. It got them to slow down and say, okay, do you have what's your other option? Can you show us the option, or at least justify that you don't have one? Talk about that you had the thought process. It actually worked surprisingly well. So yeah, I mean, it was to this day, actually, in that organization, they always have option A, B, and C. They you know, the product owners then would take those options to the stakeholder and say, which one do you like? This is the one we like, and this is why we like it, and then get into that kind of conversation. It worked pretty well in that one area.
Yeah,
I've used that one before. Yeah.
How about you, Chris?
I don't have any that I can think of right off the top.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, for me, I think you know, you try to influence people to think of other options, and it's really more of a coaching conversation that you have with product managers, product owners, you know, people that are creating strategy for the company, to have them, and of course working closely with UX, right, to better understand the customer and involving them early in the process. And it's having those conversations with those people as a coach. But you know, I'm thinking as a leader, as a technology leader, as a business leader, it's surrounding yourself with people that are going to question everything, really, you know. And
how do you know that's the right solution?
Exactly. Yeah. Like if I'm
know?
a business executive and somebody from technology is saying this is the way to go, and it's not buying into that. It's saying, why is that the way to go? What research backs that up? Are there other options that we haven't explored yet? You know, and I think that could be very powerful and important, really, for a business executive to ask those questions.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've exhausted this principle. We didn't quite get to, I think the last one, Chris and I talked for like 20, almost 30 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, on principle 2. It's just a more, you know, it's not that this isn't a good principle. It's a really important principle. They all are. They all sort of work together and fit kind of like a puzzle. When you put pieces of a puzzle together, when they're all together, it works well. And the principles in SAFe, the principles for Agile, the manifesto, they're kind of like that. But when you take one apart, and especially this one's a little harder, you know, it's a little more theoretical. But putting into practice isn't that hard. It's just having the mindset to be always questioning, right? So always thinking about making decisions at the last responsible moment, right? And then sort of committing to a solution. Anything you guys want to end this with?
I liked your, you know, questioning. You know, how do you put it into practice? Ask the question. How do we know this is the right way to go? How do we know this is the best solution? I like that.
Yeah, and I think I think this one is kind of a product management one, right? When you think about it, it's not making that commitment up front, right?
Yeah.
Signing that contract that you're going to use, you know, Azure, if that's not the right platform, right? I mean, just doing it just because somebody signed a contract.
Right.
It's really important that we don't do that, that we put it up front. We think about that up front.
All right. Well, we'll see you all in a couple of weeks for the 4th principle in the SAFe series. How many principles are there? Is it 9 or 10? I can't remember.
There's 10 now. Yeah.
10. That's right. Yeah, there are 10
yeah.
now. So we'll be doing this for the next few weeks, and then we'll pick other topics in the Scaled Agile framework and go with those. So we'll see you all in a couple of weeks. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Bye.